Britain, we are producing and killing nearly 1 billion animals every year. In a lifetime, the average person is eating more than 1,000 chickens, 40 turkeys, 30 sheep, 20 pigs.
I've spent my time with my wife trying to raise those animals to the best of our abilities, to the highest standards we can set for animal welfare. We've tried to look after them while they've been alive as well as we could do. There's no reason why they can't die as well as they should do.
A high-stressed animal gives you tough steak, and that's the last thing a butcher wants.
There's a lot of misinformation around the issue of killing without stunning beforehand. It is that effective delivery of a stun which would make so much difference to so many animals in the UK.
Retailers will often say, well, we give the consumers the choice. Well, actually, they don't have a real choice tomorrow, because without labelling, they don't know what they're eating.
One can always look back at the past where every village had a slaughterhouse, and the butcher would probably have a bit of land of his own. He'd buy stock from the local market, which would be driven not by a vehicle, lambs, pigs, cattle, to his field, and when he's run out of meat, he'd just go and get a beast, bring it in and deal with it. And everybody knew where the meat came from, all locally produced. Wonderful. An awful lot of it is economics, and there is a consequence to that. And that does sometimes come out in animal welfare. One has to comply with an enormous amount of regulations. The farmer is doing as much as he possibly can.
I'm Mike Roberts, been farming here for about 4 years now. It's a relatively small farm. We raise the animals ourselves, we take them away to be slaughtered, they come back to the farm where we have a registered butchery unit. We butcher the meat on site, pack it on site, so somebody can actually ask me, can you tell me about that sausage? I'll say, yes, I can tell you how many days old it is, I can tell you how long it's been hung for, how it was processed, how it was butchered. We're very fortunate, and that's more by luck than judgment, that the nearest abattoir for us, which has a sheep licence, is only about 10 miles away. It's a small family-run enterprise with a butcher shop attached. Over the years, with legislation changing and things like that, many of those traditional butcher shop stroke slaughterhouses have disappeared. The thing about farming is we spend all our energies making sure that our animals are as healthy as possible, they're as happy as possible, they're being cared for as well as possible, even though we know the end product for all our efforts is that animal is going to be killed for the food chain. But it doesn't mean to say we can't have compassion and have expectations of how other people deal with our animals once we've handed our animals on to somebody else.
The process of slaughter for every animal begins, one way or another, with transport. The animals have to be shifted to the abattoir. The first thing to look at is the distance involved. Everybody agrees with compassion on this. The British government agrees, the Federation of Vets of Europe agree that animals should be raised as close to the point where they're born, and they should be slaughtered as close as possible to the point where they're raised. The time that they're transported is probably the most fundamentally critical issue, and yet recently some sheep transported 50 hours into Central Europe before they were fattened briefly and slaughtered. Long distance transport for animals that are only going to be slaughtered at the end of the journey is far, far too common. It's a legal requirement that a veterinary surgeon has oversight over the slaughter process in a UK slaughterhouse. Simply having a vet on site can't actually guarantee that everything goes smoothly. It's a challenging job to give to a vet. I think they often do their best, but it cannot guarantee good welfare in every case. Dispatching an animal humanely is extremely difficult. You need 3 things in place. You need the technology to be able to do it. You need compassionate, skilled staff to be able to deliver it, and you need good regulation in place. And in many cases, a lot of people are making absolutely every effort to dispatch those animals humanely. For obvious reasons of animal welfare, it is the law throughout the European Union that before an animal has its throat slit, it's rendered unconscious, it's rendered insensible. It never feels the knife going in. But exceptions are made in terms of cultural and particularly religious sensitivities, particularly for Muslim and Jewish communities. Now, that's not to say that all meat sold to the Muslim community has not been stunned properly before slaughter. Quite the reverse, actually. About 80% in the UK of meat is stunned before it goes to slaughter. And Muslims have as much right as anybody else to know that their animals have been slaughtered humanely. But the fact remains that in some cases, animals are not being stunned, and that is a huge concern. The science is absolutely crystal clear on this. The suffering for the animals is enormous, both in terms of the damage and the pain, and in terms of the stress and the fear as they feel their legs buckling, they feel their blood pressure dropping, and they can take comfortably over a minute in the case of a large animal, a large beef animal, before they die. Let's get our technology and our regulation of the technology right so that we can deliver an effective and compassionate stun to all animals, which takes them beyond the point where they're actually slaughtered.
No method is humane if it's not properly carried out. And it is not uncommon for undercover investigators to find examples of inhumane slaughter in the UK and elsewhere. So one of the things we need is proper monitoring. That includes keeping proper records of the electrical discharges and so forth, but also of CCTV to make sure, both for the protection of animals and the staff, to ensure that the slaughter process is professional and humane. Many consumers would like to be sure that when they're eating meat or milk or eggs, that the animals producing those products have had a good life, and at slaughter, death has been as humane as possible. Looking out for the right labels is one of the ways of getting this right.
Certainly, if you go out and you buy RSPCA Freedom Food Assured or organically reared animals, you're being assured of a pretty good standard of slaughter in there. But, for instance, why do we not see a label on our meat telling us whether that animal was stunned before it was slaughtered or not? A complete mystery to me.
People talk about provenance. If anybody was to turn up on this farm and say, I want to buy a piece of pork from you, but I'll only buy it off you if you answer the following questions because I've got some concerns. How did it die? When was it slaughtered? How was it butchered? But if they're the kind of questions that they want to know the answers to, the best way is ask a farmer.
I'm Rob Young. I'm the master butcher at Highleigh Farm Butcher Shop. We are a butcher shop on a farm as opposed to a butcher shop in a high street. We've got the complete welfare of the animal at heart, how it's fed, how it's looked after, and also, very important, where it's slaughtered and how it is slaughtered. And we use a slaughterhouse locally to us who very much care for their animals, and it comes back here and we know the animal's had its best life it could have had. Our animals are taken in a calm condition. They then go into the slaughterhouse in a calm condition. They don't see other animals being slaughtered, for example, so they're very calm and very quiet when this happens to them. And that keeps their blood pressure right, it keeps the quality of the meat right. A high-stressed animal gives you tough steak, and that's the last thing a butcher wants. So I know that by looking after the animal at the slaughterhouse, it'll be good for me when it comes back to the shop. So that's what's important to a butcher.
I work for Compassion in World Farming because I think that farm animals matter. We're not opposed to slaughter, we're not opposed to religious slaughter. What we're opposed to is any form of slaughter that isn't humane. So in all our campaigns, we are trying amongst all things to make sure that consumers have those choices through proper labelling so they can choose.
If you eat meat, please make sure you know how the animals that you're eating have been slaughtered in the first place. And if you don't know, ask at your butchers, ask at your retailers. Let's increase the pressure for transparency.